This is Louise. I'm 14 years old and I live in Pittsburgh.
This is Joshua and I am 7 years old.
This is Jeffrey. I'm 18 years old and live in Lawrenceville.
This is Felix. I'm 14 years old and I live in Allegheny Commons. And this is the Pittsburgh Podcast.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for this Pittsburgh Podcast. We have a fun one planned for you and your family. Today, we feature an interview with a Pixar insider who shares what happens behind the scenes as each film is made. And speaking of Pixar, I have to share that one of my favorite movies is WALL-E. It was my first date movie with my husband.
Aww.
I'm Pittsburgh's director, Yu-Ling Cheng, and I'm here with my partners on the Pittsburgh team.
I'm Kristine Sorensen, Pittsburgh producer and KDKA anchor, and I love Pixar films too. And if I had to pick my favorite, it would definitely be Inside Out. And we'll also be asking local teenagers what their favorite movie is and why.
And I'm Melissa Rayworth, the editor at Pittsburgh. My favorite Pixar film has to be Cars because it was the first movie I ever took my oldest child to in a movie theater. I can't wait to hear more about the science and creativity behind these amazing films. But first, as our regular listeners know, we always love to start our conversations with a Pittsburgh gem, a place that we think is really cool and we want to make sure you know about. Our hidden gem today is the Carnegie Science Center. Kristine, tell us more.
One thing I think when I think of the Carnegie Science Center that I don't want people to misconceive is you don't have to be a science fan. I mean, I was never a science kid. I love the Science Center. There's so much to love about it. If you are at all curious, you are going to enjoy the Science Center. There are so many cool permanent exhibits that are always there. Things about Mars, things about trains, sports works, body works, Bricksburg with Legos, the Little Learner Clubhouse for actually little toddler kids, which you may not realize, but there's a whole area just for the younger ones who may not enjoy some other parts. And then one of my favorite parts is the submarine. What an incredible opportunity to go in an actual sub that is in the Ohio River right outside the museum. And that's not even talking about the touring exhibits like the Pixar exhibit that came through, which is how we got excited to learn more about Pixar movies. On top of that, they have all the fun shows and experiences with the planetarium and the Ranko's Giant Cinema. And then I know our Pittsburgh summer camp guide is really fantastic. And one of the highlights is always the Carnegie Science Center summer camps. My kids have done those. They learn so much and they don't even realize they're learning because they're having so much fun. So they make science fun. I really highly recommend it for all ages. And it's kind of fun if you have a mix of ages because that can be tricky. But if you have a range, I think you'll find something there for everybody.
That's the experience I have had when my kids were younger. My boys are 3.5 years apart. And, when they're small, 3.5 years is a lot. Mm-hmm. So they don't always want to do the same things. And the Science Center was a place we could go and they both could run around and find things they wanted to do.
I love the shows they do. I remember making veggie chips out of real vegetables in the Science Center. They didn't taste great, but I was like, this is awesome. And one of these days, I am determined, along with my kids, if all of us want to do this, we want to beat that robot at air hockey. I hope I do it one of these days.
I bet you will.
Yeah, and when I say age range, I mean literally like 3 to 83. I mean grandparents, toddlers, you name it. I do think the Carnegie Science Center, which was soon to be called the Kamin Science Center, so don't be confused, definitely worth checking out.
At Pittsburgh.org, you can learn more about the Carnegie Science Center, soon to be the Kamin Science Center, and other places where you can explore fun, hands-on learning. To learn more, look for the links at Pittsburgh.org/podcast.
Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh. You're listening to the Pittsburgh Podcast.
Pittsburghers know what a gem we have in the Carnegie Science Center on the north side. Their mission is to encourage curiosity through engaged hands-on learning experiences for kids of all ages, in hopes of sparking an interest in STEM. The Carnegie Science Center just hosted the popular exhibit, The Science Behind Pixar, where families can learn through interactive exhibits how our favorite Pixar films are made. Today, we are excited to have a special guest from Pixar Animation Studios. Brianne Moseley is the exhibition designer and project manager at Pixar and has worked with museums and science centers all over the world. Brianne, welcome.
Hello, happy to be here.
Brianne, we are so excited to learn more about what you do. We know that so many of our listeners, kids and adults, are huge Pixar fans. I think some of these movies, they just mean a lot to all of us. So it's going to be so much fun to sort of look behind the scenes at the science and the math. Now, you have been with Pixar Studios for 15 years, and your role is to create exhibits that feature original Pixar concept art and films with educational experiences. So tell us more about your work. What was the inspiration to create these exhibits that would be out in the world, and what's it like? I guess you're traveling a whole lot.
Yeah, so we originally started with an art exhibition. This was before I started working at Pixar, but we had partnered with MoMA on an exhibition featuring concept art from our films. We're sort of well known as being a computer graphic animation company, and I think at the time that this exhibition premiered back in, I want to say 2001, I don't think people had a really good understanding of what it took to sort of get our films on the screen. And so we were trying to sort of give them an understanding that there was this very analog process as far as the visual development goes, and display it in a fine arts setting to give people an idea of all of the sort of analog work that goes into the films before the digital process begins. And we've had a tour of this more traditional art style of concept art from our films for quite a long time. But then when the Boston Museum of Science approached us about exploring more of the digital processes, this is when we began to develop the Science Behind Pixar.
And I love the Science Behind Pixar exhibit. I had so much fun going through the exhibit. And it struck me how many steps there are in making these iconic films that you make. Starting with, as you said, the story and art, and then moving to modeling and rigging and surfaces and sets and cameras, animations, simulations, lighting and rendering. It's incredible. Can you share more about each step and just kind of the process you went through in putting this exhibit together?
Yeah, so I will admit I come more from the fine art side of things. And so it was really challenging putting together this exhibit that is way more in tune with our technical process. But again, working with the folks at Boston Museum of Science was really amazing. Again, this was a huge partnership with them, and they deserve a lot of credit for putting together the exhibit and designing the interactives. But they worked really closely with us at Pixar. We had one of our chief scientists was on the project, Tony DeRose, and he's done extensive work with makers fairs and other educational experiences for kids. And so he was really, really key in being able to accurately describe our technical process in a way that was digestible to, everyday audience.
That must be challenging. I would think it must be challenging to have to find a way to capture all this in a way that somebody could just absorb it, spending a half hour or so walking through an exhibit.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of time that we put into developing this exhibit and making sure that we hit all of the key points of each section and making it easily understandable, even to someone like me who is an adult but doesn't have a, very deep understanding of math and science. Like, I can go into this exhibit and get at least a base understanding of what it is that we're seeing on the screen when we go and see a film.
I was struck by the exhibit and sort of what you said, like I learned a lot that I didn't realize. Like there's a whole lighting department and they just focus on creating different lights throughout the film to create that mood that they're looking for. And what was so fun is they had this screen of Finding Dory, right? The fish. And you could go in and push all these different buttons and change the lighting from like red to purple to green to blue. And as I was doing it, I was like, all of a sudden I feel happy. All of a sudden I feel a little sad. All of a sudden I feel like I just woke up. It was really interesting how that works. And then you go and learn about the people who work on it. And there's a whole team of people and all they focus on is the lighting.
That's so interesting. But you see why the creative choices they make really matter. Because like you said, it affects how you feel when you're watching it.
Yeah.
So interesting. So Brianne, obviously there is so much science and math behind the Pixar movies. But as Yu-Ling said, when we're all watching them, we don't even realize that all of that has taken place. What kind of thoughts would you share for kids who are listening who are maybe studying science and math and they love these subjects, but they can't quite yet picture that there'd be a real world way that they're going to use all of this?
I mean, that's part of the inspiration for the entire exhibit is really trying to get kids to understand that math is a creative endeavor and that we use it every day here at Pixar to create beautiful films, artistic expression, the kind of stuff that you're learning when you're in junior high, like the basics are the concepts that we're putting into place in our filmmaking every day. So coming to the exhibit is going to give them an understanding of what they can do with that math and that science. So when they're sitting in class and they're like, ugh, why am I learning this? So boring, or I don't get it, or like, how can I connect this to my life in the future? We are here at Pixar and we are using these concepts every day. They are the absolute base of everything that you see on the screen when you go and see a Pixar film.
I had a moment during the exhibit where they had Merida from the movie Brave, and Merida has like the red hair, super curly. And just to highlight the math that was used, they had to figure out how to make the hair move.
And make it, I guess, look real, like we would expect anybody's hair to move.
So every strand of her hair is mathematically figured out, and they figured out they had to use the idea of a coil to make the hair stay curly, but then they needed a double coil, like another coil inside the coil, because as she's riding the horse or running or jumping somewhere, right, the hair has to move up and down, but then stay as curly as it normally.
But it has to be moving.
But it has to have movement. And the person who spoke about it spoke about the math behind it. And I was just like, I love math by the end.
So there's an entire team of people who are dedicated to trying to figure out how to simulate a realistic effect in the film without, individually animating each strand of hair, which would be far too time consuming for our filmmakers. Going back to sort of like, why is all this even happening in the first place? And you mentioned the lighting section and how there's this team of people who are just lighting a scene. A lot of those concepts are the same as live action filmmaking when it comes to lighting a scene, except we in computer animation don't have sets, we don't have prop houses, we don't have physical lights, any of it. It all is, we start with nothing and everything has to be built from scratch. So you're building a chair, you're starting in modeling, and you're, building a set, and then you have to have a digital camera, and then you build the characters, and then you have to rig the characters so that they move like puppets, and then you have to animate the characters, and then you have to light everything. And all of this there's a virtual world where there's a virtual camera, virtual lights on virtual sets, and all of those things are created through math.
It's incredible.
What you're seeing on the screen is a series of equations, and you wouldn't get to that point without the basic math concepts that you learn about in the exhibition.
It was fascinating to learn about the many different roles at Pixar, and we noticed a theme across all the interviews. Many people shared that they love working at Pixar because of their passion for what they do. But what really struck us was their determination for problem solving, in particular new problems that maybe come up for a new film at Pixar. Can you share more about what the work culture is like at Pixar?
Yeah, so the work culture at Pixar is incredibly collaborative, and it has to be that way because there's so many different moving parts on a film that everybody has to be able to communicate effectively with each other, be on the same page, build on each other's ideas, and really do it all in a positive way. So I'd say collaboration is our most important aspect of our work culture.
That's so cool. We keep hearing so much from school districts in the Pittsburgh region that focusing on things like collaboration as a soft skill that they know all kids need is just so important, and it's really become a priority. So for kids who are listening in and wondering how they could work at a place like Pixar, what can you tell us about your career path that led you to this work?
My career path is pretty unconventional, and I think I got pretty lucky to be where I am. I went to school for a fine arts degree. I had worked in a lot of odd jobs and on mostly waiting tables for a long time, but I worked a few entry-level roles in museums and offices and got some experience doing office work. And then I came into Pixar as a very entry-level assistant and worked my way up through all these years, and just through being open to new responsibilities and new roles and staying curious about what kind of work there was at Pixar and just being there consistently and working hard, I got to where I am today. And, a lot of luck and a lot of hard work can can get you places.
We often hear that from people that it wasn't like they arrived on the first day of their freshman year of college knowing exactly what they wanted to do forever, and then they were on this straight line path. Most everyone that we talk to who loves their work had sort of a windy path to get there. And like you said, they worked really hard and they took those entry-level jobs and then they found what they love.
It can be important to keep your eyes open to potential paths that open up to you rather than being so focused on only one outcome, because you might not see the other opportunities that are presenting themselves to you.
And you said earlier, like being curious and being creative helped kind of lead you down your windy path to where you are now. So I'm curious, like, what do you do to stay creative? How do you remain curious? Where do you turn for inspiration?
Well, when it comes to work, I try to be open to projects that are outside of my normal tasks. So if I hear something going on, they need extra hand, and I think I could lend expertise, I'm always going to say yes to those things, because you never know who you're going to meet through that experience or what kind of new skills you're going to learn. So I'm always open to one-off projects that seem like a little bit out of my realm of expertise, because I'm only going to learn and expand through that experience. But outside of work, mostly just in my surroundings and trying to consume as much creative content from other people. I mean, if it's just scrolling through Instagram or going to an exhibition, obviously I'll try to go to a lot of exhibitions to see what other people are doing and keep my work relevant and up to date and be inspired by exhibition designs of other people. But then I love just taking walks through the city. I'm in the Bay Area on the West Coast near San Francisco. And so I love to just go into the city and walk around, and it's a really beautiful place to just kind of take in your surroundings.
And all of the things you just shared, it's great advice for parents and caregivers too, to encourage creativity and curiosity at home, right? Like just taking your kids for a simple walk and noticing what's around, or maybe the latest exhibit at the Carnegie Science Center to learn something new.
Exactly. I love that you said that in your work, sometimes you look for the opportunity to do something that's a little outside what you normally do. I think it's easy, especially when we're super busy and we have a million things going on, to just sort of stick with the things you already know you're good at or you're comfortable with. And I love that idea of you never know what good could come if you stretch yourself a bit.
Being a little bit scared is healthy.
I like that. All right. So we've asked you all these important questions that can inspire people about your career path and about this exhibit. But now we have to ask you our favorite question, which is, do you have a favorite Pixar film?
Oh, God, everybody always asks this question.
It's funny, when we knew we were going to be talking to you, just as a viewer, I don't even know that I can decide. I might vote for The Incredibles, but honestly, I don't know if I can pick. So it may be hard for you to pick, but we'd love to hear. Well, What are your several favorites? How about that?
It is so hard to pick just one, but a few of my favorite. I mean, Up is pretty far at the top. WALL-E is fantastic, especially the first act of the film where there's not any dialogue at all. It's just incredible storytelling, what they were able to do with no dialogue whatsoever. I love Incredibles. I love our more recent films. I absolutely love Turning Red. I think it's a fantastic film if you haven't seen it. God, yeah, it's so hard to pick. I'm like, and this one, and that one, and that one.
I love that you mentioned Up and WALL-E. Those were the first two movie dates I had with my husband before we got married. Yeah,
absolutely.
But I will say, in my family, there's a lot of references to Inside Out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. That's an amazing, amazing movie.
Well, Brianne, thank you so much for taking time today to share with us about Pixar, the science behind these great films, just how math is involved, and just how we can all, as kids or adults, remain curious and creative in our life. We appreciate you coming today and sharing your story with Pittsburgh.
Thanks for having me.
That kind of blew my mind. I never realized what went into a movie, especially how math is actually a creative endeavor. That never occurred to me, and that what we're seeing on the screen, as she said, is actually a series of equations.
You really don't think about it. And there's so much here about curiosity and looking into what's behind something and how it's really made. As we've heard in so many of the interviews we've done, life is about asking questions and curiosity. And I think the more adults can ask questions and make space for their kids to ask questions, we can all learn so much and everything becomes a little more fun.
And they're so good at asking questions at Pixar. I remember seeing the exhibit, and they had the bug's life, and they recreated the tree and the bugs and so forth. But what was interesting in the exhibit is you could crawl underneath the tree and look up as if you were a bug. So then they could figure out, what does it look like? How tall does the tree look? And then they program it and use all that math to make it come alive on the screen.
It's amazing.
Wow. I mean, they have a lighting department, right? So you talk about the hair, there's a whole department just for lighting and like figuring out how the light changes in the water with Finding Nemo or up in the sky. And it's really incredible what they do, and it's inspirational.
I think it'd be a lot of fun for families that have heard this episode to now go back and rewatch some of their favorite Pixar movies and start thinking about that as, you can even sort of pause it as you go and say to your kids, like, think about, like she mentioned, the fact that when Merida's riding her horse and her hair has to be flying behind her, they had to figure out the location of every strand of hair so that there wasn't just sort of this big mass moving all at once. I think it'd be fun to watch a movie with kids and talk about that.
You're listening to the Kidsburg podcast.
Pittsburgh is Kidsburg.
And, there are so many great movies, and we started to wonder, what movies do teens like to watch? So the students at SLB Radio's Youth Media Center helped us out by asking other students what is their favorite animated movie and why.
My favorite animated movie has to be Mulan. I loved Mushu the Dragon. I felt so connected to Mushu's humor for some reason. But I also think the way that they structured the characters and how every character had such a different sense of humor, I found that to be really fun to watch.
I think Snow White's really good because I watched it when I was a kid and I was thinking that this is kind of weird, but at the same time it's kind of catchy. The dwarves were the best part. They were kind of weird as well, but they're catchy.
Jack and the Cuckoo Clock Heart. It's like a stop motion, kind of like Coraline, and the theme is just very soft, and I like the music to it and like the backstory.
I love Hayao Miyazaki from Studio Ghibli. He made a movie really recently called The Boy and the Heron. He spent like 10 years making The Boy and the Heron. What's really great about it is there's so much real emotion and integrity and hand-drawn animation that I don't think you really get any other way.
This was another fun podcast, and there's still more to come.
We'll be dropping one more episode next week, and you can also check out the episodes that we already have out if you haven't heard them already.
Just go to kidsburg.org/podcast to find them all. And be sure to sign up for our free weekly Kidsburg newsletter to find news stories and online guides that help grown-ups with the big, beautiful job of parenting in the Pittsburgh region and beyond.
This is Lamel. I'm in the 8th grade, and this is the Kidsburg podcast.
On the next Kidsburg podcast, we'll talk with 2 doctors about how they're developing a mind-powered robotic arm.
Until then, we hope you'll visit kidsburg.org to learn about the resources and advice from local experts that can help all kids have the best opportunity to thrive. Thanks for joining us for the Kidsburg podcast.